football championship.
Футбольный чемпионат.
Yes, of course.
Over 3 million people came here. There was a lot of talks that they are going to terrorists. But these people have returned home from Russia, destroyed the entire ideological machine. We are ready to resettle up to 5 or even 7 million people. We are working on these conditions. There is no doubt that Russian Germans are one of Russia's indigenous peoples. They were once the second largest ethnic group in Russia, after the Russians.
Место по численности после русских.
Zvezda Holding presents Dynamic Spectrum Talks. Now.
Hello, friends. We are pleased to welcome you to our podcast, Dynamic Spectrum Talks. My name is Anna Shafran, and next to me is my colleague Yuri Lindre.
Greetings, everyone.
Our program is a territory of free speech and equal dialogue. We believe that the majority of people in the world adhere to sensible positions when serious difficulties arise in the geopolitical space at the level of relations between states. People's diplomacy can play an important role. In our podcast, we talk to people from all over the world. Our geography is very vast, and today we will continue our mission to build the very bridges that are so necessary for peaceful and constructive coexistence.
We are delighted to welcome Waldemar Gerdt to the studio. Mr. Gerdt is an extraordinary politician of German origin who was born and raised in Kazakhstan before relocating to Germany. He subsequently became a member of the Bundestag, the German parliament, representing the Alternative for Germany party. In addition, our guest also serves as the chairman of the International Council of Russian Germans. Could I just check whether this is correct?
Совета российских немцев. Все верно?
Almost, but there are no Germans with Russian roots. There are Germans from Russia.
No problem. So, Germans born in Russia. Welcome.
Waldemar, good to see you. At the beginning, I would like to ask you about your personal history. We know that you moved to Germany in 1993, and before that you lived in Kazakhstan, as Yuri had already said, and you were the chairman of a collective farm. Please tell us about this period of your life. What was it like?
Well, it wasn't exactly a collective farm, more like an auxiliary agriculture production or a sub-farm. A collective farm is pretty straightforward, but a sub-farm is a similar structure, but not independent, subordinate to some organization. It was a very interesting time. I graduated from the Kustanai Agricultural Institute with a distinction. I'm proud of it, but I don't think it's necessary to mention. But since it's there is nothing to hide.
A cum laude red diploma was very valued at the time.
Absolutely. We had an amazing graduation. Of course, our course had the largest number of red diplomas or cum laude in the history of the institute, which was so exciting. We had a great time organizing socialist competitions. After graduation, I went to work, like all other normal people did in the Soviet Union. There was no hereditary transfer of positions, so I started my working life right away. Of course, everything had to work to make money. My mom was a milkmaid and my dad was a carpenter. They were just ordinary folks with no administrative resources. I started as a brigadier, specializing as a zoo-engineer, and then I was noticed and transferred to one of the state farms in Krasnoarmeysk city as chief zootechnician. The Gorbachev springs began, and it was possible to be a creative.
Можно было покреативить, а креативить, вот как-то вот у меня,
And I like it. And we started producing our own money at the state farm.
Interesting.
It's called an emission center.
And guess what? This is now being done by higher-ranking politicians who are trying to create an alternative to the dollar. And guess what else? We already made an alternative to the ruble at that time. We printed it ourselves at home, and it was a roaring success.
И уже начала мысль экономика, тот же самый
The motorist didn't just pour used oil in the field anymore. He sold it to the stocker, who gave him money in return. And the best part is he could use it to buy something else. We started to create a new scale economy, and it was an amazing thing to see. I was so passionate about perestroika. I'm such a believer. I believe in almost everything.
Ну и это, конечно, было замечено, и главный зоотехник вот такую эту инициативу и прочее.
And guess what? The chief zootechnician suggested that I go into politics, and I did it. But this is another stage of my life.
Let's dive deeper into the Soviet period. You were the first secretary of the All-Union Leninist Communist Youth Union, ВЛКСМ of Kazakhstan.
Казахстана. А как так получилось, что вы пошли еще...
How did you align with the party line? What were your expectations from party work, and how did it play out?
В плане партийной работы.
Back then, it was tough to make it and stand out if you didn't do to the party line. There was a very clear system of educating young careers, young cadres, which is precisely what America do now.
Делают американцы, то, что делали и делают. Ну, не хочу сравнивать, но...
For example, our foreign minister, Annalena Baerbock, I think it's clear who she is and what level of education she has. So she offers Putin a 360-degree turn, so she can help people tens of thousands of kilometers away from Germany. She's the epitome of intelligence. At a certain period of time, the Soros Foundation took notice of her, and Baerbock was brought up correctly and has always known her limitations. When I lived in Kazakhstan, the Communist Party did exactly the same thing. They selected those who stood out, thought outside the box, and educated them. This is a normal process. This needs to be restored now. Talented young people should be able to use their talents in new directions. The party workers invited me to the Komsomol after seeing my creativity.
Молодая молодежь могла бы, используя свой талант, ну, по каким-то новым линеечкам расти.
They must have thought I was going to start printing money for the whole of Kazakhstan. To put a stop to this, they invited me to join the Komsomol as the first secretary.
This is how the Deutsche Tenge currency ended without starting.
To canonize the activity.
Ну вот. Ну и тогда, конечно,
I would never have taken the step if I hadn't believed in perestroika. When we talked to the elders, they had hope that we would be released from Kazakhstan.
Что нас отпустят из Казахстана, нас, немцев.
The Germans who were sent there in exile.
Отправили.
Where will they let you go? To Germany?
Германию.
Нет,
To the homeland.
Германии не было тогда.
No, Germany was not our homeland then. And that's a fact. The Volga region was and still is our homeland. Let me be clear. During the Second World War, it is evident that the Germans were evicted for two reasons. First, the Wehrmacht was advancing from the west. Second, there are 800,000 German-speaking Germans in the rear. The motivation was clear, but the execution was terrible. Half the people froze to death in the steppes or died on the way in railway carriages. But we were not alone there in Kazakhstan. There were Chechens, Tatars, and many other repressed people who had been taken away from the front lines. Once they were rehabilitated, they were allowed to return home. The Chechens went to Chechnya and the Tatars went to Crimea. All the nations returned to their places except for the Germans. And that's still the case today. There is no such thing. Let's be clear, the German Republic was legally formalized as Chechnya or Bashkortostan.
It was an autonomous, socialist Soviet Republic of Volga Germans.
This allowed us to preserve our identity, and we did it. My grandmother didn't speak Russian at all. Her birth certificate was written in Old German in the city of Engels. They had their own theater letters, their own newspapers, and their own community. But the German people were not allowed to return to this land. The Russian Germans were not given the opportunity to return to this land. Nikita Khrushchev made it clear that the land in Kazakhstan would remain uncultivated if they left. They can stay there. For our people, the order to stay meant that we stayed. We are law-abiding people. They agreed. All right, we'll raise the virgin land, we will be seen and appreciated, and then they will bring us home. Many generations of our elders passed away there thinking, it's a shame we didn't get to return home in time. But you will. You will make sure that the Volga becomes our home again. At the same time, we never heard stories about the watermelons, melons, roses, or the quality of the land. The land was certainly not fertile when the Germans arrived. Catherine the Great sent them to hold the cordon and kept the land Russians.
Could you tell us a little more about how you joined the Komsomol?
We must understand the situation of those who were unable to return to the homeland of the Volga for certain reasons. We were certain that perestroika would allow us to return. The young people who had the education and opportunity to go into politics did just that. It was very difficult for Germans to get into leadership roles before that. Until 1956, our parents went to check their status all the time. It was a bordered camp, plain and simple. And I was determined to make a deal through political process and get home one day. We would all go back to the Volga together. I also went into politics for a second reason. In those years, I was inspired by the emergence of a new phenomenon, scientific and technical creativity of youth movement. We set up ventures with the Komsomol. The cooperative movement inspired me more than any meeting ever could. I was late for meetings because we were opening another enterprise. That's why they didn't want me there in the first place. They said, you are not a normal politician. Get on with the business and go to your farm to deal with those foxes. So I ended up there, slipped into politics and returned to what I was good at.
Apparently, the business developed successfully in the collective farm.
Before we left, yes. After we left, everything changed.
Once the Soviet Union had collapsed, everything was transformed.
We are delighted to continue our conversation with Waldemar Gerdt, a Russian German, former representative of the Alternative for Germany party in the Bundestag, a businessman and a man with an inspiring story.
With an amazing history and destiny. The history of Russian Germans is nothing short of astonishing. The first large German settlements in Russia appeared during the time of Peter the Great's father, Alexei Mikhailovich Romanov. This was in the middle and second half of the 17th century. Peter the Great was especially keen to attract German specialists. After his extensive travels in Europe and many years of close friendship with the Germans in the district of Moscow called German Sloboda, he developed a strong affinity for German mechanics and engineering. The Volga region has been actively settled by Germans for the last 300 years. In a sense, they can be considered the indigenous people of our country.
I wholeheartedly agree with the statement. I'm certain that one day we'll be given the opportunity to restore historical justice. There is no doubt that Russian Germans are one of Russia's indigenous peoples. They were once the second largest ethnic group in Russia, after the Russians. I didn't know it myself. I knew we were cool, but not that cool, of course. Before the revolution, there were about 3,500 German settlements, which are now known as territories of advanced development. They formed different areas, including pharmacy, engineering, construction, bridge building, military, and agriculture, of course. The genetic code of our two peoples is identical. We are trying to break it now because the unification of our people has always guaranteed prosperity in all the territories we lived in. Our future is a common economic zone from Lisbon to Vladivostok. If we are not friends, there will be always a war.
будем воевать.
Our history has been wrongly written by external
Которая
forces.
со стороны вершится.
There are people and systems that are trying to separate our two peoples, and they will fail. Despite this, they were never able to separate even on the level of simple peasants who lived on the Volga and were friends with all nations, passing on their knowledge and acquiring new ones. Russia has a historical window of opportunity. I talked about it everywhere. This is our chance to repeat the process that was completed under the Catherine the Great, when the golden age of Catherine emerged and was built not without our participation. Russia has the same opportunity now,
А с большим нашим участием сейчас у России точно такая же возможность.
and Europe is shrinking and throwing nations out of itself.
Почти 4
And it's a simple fact that almost 400,000 businesses have already relocated to America. And now the Americans are doing the same thing they did after the Second World War, when everything was being destroyed in Europe.
это призвание.
They stole our potential and built their economy on it. I'm driven by a vocation, not a profession. This is my calling.
В Германии
If it wasn't my vocation, I would have given up a long time ago. I'm paying a big price for that. I no longer have a business in Germany. All my accounts are closed. My family is not here and I'm preparing for their move. That's why I'm engaged in this task 24/7 to create conditions for the voluntary and easy relocation of European business to Eurasia. This is essential to save it from complete bankruptcy, to develop these territories and restore relations. And when things improve in Europe, we will be first to integrate these territories into our common economic space.
This is a crucial point. The day before Russian President Vladimir Putin signed the relevant decree, he made it clear that citizens of different countries around the world will now have the opportunity to move to Russia for political reasons. Those who do not agree with ultra-liberal values and principles have no place here.
Those who have been discriminated against in their home countries.
If you are discriminated against on that basis and don't have the opportunity to raise your children in a traditional way, move to Russia. We recently discussed this in our podcast. This flow is on the rise. British citizens are coming, Italians are coming, and so on.
Germany, Netherlands,
Who are coming to Russia today?
America.
Yes, the USA.
Yes, there's even a whole American village in Russia.
I know this topic well because it's mine. I was involved in the creation of the Executive Order 702. I have been saying for a very long time at all levels of government that we need to remove the concept of compatriot and simplify the legislation process of cross-border movement. Russia must act now, before it isn't too late. Take the step now. This decree has made the relocation possible. Previously, you had to know Russian language and be a compatriot to move. I speak Russian normally, but I was not entitled to move to Russia because I was not a Russian citizen. I was a citizen of Kazakhstan, and there was no way to prove that I belonged to the compatriots. It was virtually impossible to prove that my surname, Gerdt, spelled with G in this document with an AH in the other, and everything was like that. This decree has changed everything. Everyone can come now.
I want to know if many Russian Germans consider the Volga region to be their homeland, and if there are many who still want to return there.
No, time is lost. For example, I have not been to the Volga, but I know about it from stories of old people have told me.
Наших стариков. Этих стариков уже нет в живых. То есть вот эта генетическая связь.
The genetic link with the Volga has been lost. We have no interest in entering developed territories.
Куда-то заходить на территории, которые освоены.
We are designed to create territories of advanced development.
Не осваивать территории. Наше призвание создавать территории опережающего развития, а их у нас очень много. Та же Тверь.
We have plenty of them, just like Tver.
Там есть, я не буду сейчас иначе.
My hometown.
Да-да.
No, not the city itself, but there are territories that have been depopulated. Moscow has sucked everyone out of there. But we can create a Russian Bavaria in Tver region. People will come to see these villages, buy clean products, and walk with children. This vastness would bring tears to any German farmer's eyes. So why not to let these people create a Russian Bavaria in Tver? We will create, make, raise, and people will come, look to this beauty and buy clean products and walk with children.
There is already an Italian farm in the Tver region.
There is, yes, the Italians are good. They are starting to work on this territory with their wine and cheese. We are going to do the same thing. According to our forecast, if we create the right conditions, we are ready to resettle up to 5 or even 7 million people. We are working on these conditions. How do we tell people about this? This is where we can become colleagues. We have a media group, for example, that works in all European languages. I can give them an assignment to talk about Russia, because it would be a very short report and I wouldn't see them at work the next day. But there will come in time when we can cooperate and talk about this topic. We have the same theme and we want to develop people's diplomacy.
We haven't yet discussed your life in Germany over the past 20 years. Tell us, how did it happen that you ended up there? You had the idea to move to your ancestral homeland in the Volga region, didn't you? You continued your political activity, no longer through the Komsomol, but through the Alternative for Germany. Tell us about this period of your life.
Why Germany and not the Volga? Everything was solved by one speech of Boris Yeltsin. The hope to return to the Volga was the main message of Boris Nikolaevich policy. We received confirmation from him that he would restore historical justice as soon as he became president. Russian Germans supported him and he became president. When he visited the Volga region, he spoke there, not on an armored car, but in the same style. He said that he would lay down his bones, but not a single German would be there. Well, we'll give them Kapustin Yar, an atomic test site. As far as I know, these people, in 3 years, gardens will be blooming there. So for us, it was a terrible slap in the face to all the people who had been waited for so many years. Over 200 years dedicated to Russia, even during the World War II, more than 17 heroes of the Soviet Union were Germans, who changed their surnames just to go to war and defend the USSR, their homeland. But after the statement by Yeltsin, we realized that we have no chance of going back. And at the time, the process set in motion by Helmut Kohl and Mikhail Gorbachev was already underway. So many people said, but you ran away. And I said, what choice did you have? To raise your children at a nuclear test site or go to Germany? We didn't run away, actually. You threw us out. And now, when our homeland here in Russia is in danger, many people have a burning desire to return back. We have to be there. We have to help. We have to rebuild everything that has been destroyed in the past. Thanks God, not everything was lost. There is no resentment, no genetic rejection of Russia. On the contrary, there is a huge urge to rebuild and join the friendly family of Russian peoples, as it was once intended.
Was it difficult to settle in Germany?
Settling in Germany was challenging, not because it was difficult, but because it was unfamiliar. Many people who came to Germany were blown away. Everything here is beautiful and everything here is good. I was in cultural shock. I looked at all this and thought, I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do here. I have no outlet for my engineers here. I was depressed for 2 days. Everyone around me was admiring, and it was walking around thinking, I'm going to create something meaningful.
For a German engineer, when the mechanism works, it's like death, because there is nothing to do.
Thankfully, we were given German language courses. My old German was very different, and that was a shock. I was at loss as to which of us, German now, me or them. After just 3 or 4 days, I was back to my senses. In just a couple of months, I was running a pig farm. We raised almost 17,000 head of pigs there. I had hope that there would be staff there as well, but I found myself alone with my phone and 17,000 pigs. Needless to say, it was a shock.
Without a Komsomol party leader.
But that's how I adapted there, and I applied the knowledge I had, and it proved to be very useful. Yes, there were moments when I had to readjust, but creativity and finding solutions played a decisive role. 6 months later, I already had a construction company, my own, without a construction degree. I realized how easy it is to do everything here. You don't have to steal, you don't have to send a supply person anywhere. You don't need to a back porch. Everything in the shop, you just pick it out. And I thought, how can you not build here? I went to the bank for a loan when I didn't have any money. Probably I'm the first unemployed person who almost persuaded a banker to give him 470,000 euros. He and I are friends now, and he says, you lacked a little bit of vocabulary. I still didn't understand everything you were saying, but you spoke so convincingly that I was ready to sign it all. He explained me how to do it. I left, got 3 salaries, came back, took out a loan, and built my house 8 months later.
Fantastic. How did the alternative for Germany come about?
The alternative for Germany was a necessary and inevitable development. Business was booming, the country was stunning, and there was a real sense of hope for the future, with the prospect of raising children and grandchildren. But then, out of the blue, there was a trend. On New Year Eve 2015 in Cologne city, there were over 1,000 rapes and attempts rapes.
It was the biggest news story of the day. It was very high profile.
It was a shock to me. I understand that this is not something that happens in discos. We were really declared war. I don't know how to explain it. A disco. Why did we fight for the girls? Because who win the girls win the domination in general.
A woman is the earth, the fertility, the future generations.
Yes. I was very sad that this happened. And when local Germans came to me, already at the age of 80, asking me to take them in. It was unusual. Germans don't go in uninvited, especially after 8 o'clock in the evening. They talked about the country being in great danger. One of them said, Waldemar, bring up your Russian Germans. I said, what's the problem? He says, look, on the rape claims, not a single report of a fight. Where are our guys? The 3 who fought off for our girls were a Yugoslav who led the girls into the bar and 2 Russian-speaking Germans who rescued the girls and got them out of it. If you don't lift up your youth and your people were completely lost. He said, let's have a IFD convention. Why don't you come? I was not yet in the party or in this alternative for Germany, IFD. To me, it was a fascist party. I knew it from media information that it was a fascist party. I didn't go into this issue at the time. I said to him, do I look like a fascist? He said, do I like a fascist? I said to him, are you in the party? He says, yes. And I have a lot of respect for this man. He died recently at the age of 97. I got interested and went to the Congress. I started listening to their speeches and I realized that the German people are not quite dead yet. The speeches were beautiful, but they didn't touch the root of the problem. Suddenly I realized that God was speaking to me. I'm a believer. I'm hearing believer. I know when God is speaking to me. And when he said, "Go and speak," I realized I was hooked. I tried to leave the auditorium, but I couldn't. I went forward, unprepared, undocumented. I was hoping to be chased away. I was asked, "What do you want?" I said, "I want to perform like all the other smart speakers here do." And the woman, administrator, said to me, "Oh, sure, I'll check the list. What's your last name?" I said, "I'm not in the list." She says, "Give me your papers." I said, "What papers?" She said, "Well, a criminal record certificate." I said, "I don't have any papers." She said, "How are you going to perform? We can't do that." I said, "Really? You can't?" She said, "No, of course not." I said, "Oh, thank God." I turned around and walked away. And then the granddad said, "What did he want?" She said, "He is weird. He wanted to perform without papers." And he said, "What don't you know? This is a Waldemar. Put him on the list there."
Almost the same people. Everything is our way.
And so I went to speak. If I'm watching the speech now, it's a little bit embarrassing for me. I was talking about the fact that you all talk about consequences, but the root is that you don't like yourself as Germans. You have no identity. You have lost it. My grandfather got into my head, "You're a German, or I'll kill you." And it's good or bad? I think this is good. When a man realizes who he is, it's very hard to bend him, but when you have taken away his identity, he falls from any wind. And that's the theme I touched on there.
What is the mood in Germany right now? Do Germans want good neighborly relations with Russia? What do you think is necessary for this?
They want. In kitchens is indicative for me, but we are talking about people's diplomacy. The cabinet of people's diplomacy is a kitchen or hall where they socialize more.
The kitchen probably, of course.
In private, domestic conversations, everyone says, "No, what? It is a complete madness to go war with Russia, but it's good to be friends." But you see, since kindergarten, since schools, when they play war, they play against the Russians. When trouble is coming, it always comes from the East. The propaganda that Americans have introduced, it has a reflection. But 70% of people today look to people like me with hope in order not to let these relations be broken.
We also recalled the impact of Polish influence before the broadcast, before we started our conversation. Zbigniew Bzezzyński, this is his thought regarding the necessity of breaking off relations between Russia and Germany.
Yes, this black genius.
In his work, The Great Chessboard, he wrote that we should not let Europe connect the technology of the Germans and the resources of Russia. This is a death blow to the American project.
But he wrote us a program.
Yes.
Since he say we can do it, so we absolutely have to do it. And for this purpose, people's diplomacy is the most important and the last instrument we have left in our hands. But it's the most effective if we play the long game. And we will play the long game together with you and the others.
If the upper class don't want, the lower class will make them.
Our time is coming to an end, but I would like to ask the traditional question that we ask everyone in the studio. What can we do at the universal level of people's diplomacy to speed up the process of restoring good relations?
Scan the mood of Russians towards the West, and we will scan the attitudes of the Western nations towards Russia. And when we exchange this data, we will also take the initiatives. For example, we are now proposing the introduction of a 6-month visa for cognitive tourism.
That's a great idea.
I'm sure that this idea will attract a huge number of tourists. Do you remember the football championship?
Yes, of course.
Over 3 million people came here. There was a lot of talks that they are going to terrorists, but these people have returned home from Russia, destroyed the entire ideological machine. But then it started to working again in full force. If we had continued to work in the same spirit, we wouldn't be in the situation as we are now. We need to continue to unite peoples and create peace. There are not many peacemakers, but there are very active peoples like me and you.
Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will inherit the kingdom of heaven. Thank you very much. Waldemar Gerdt was with us in this studio today, a Russian-German politician and businessman. Thank you for this very interesting conversation. We hope to see you again.
Thank you very much, Waldemar.
Thank you for the invitation. I will be very happy to see you again.
Вновь с вами встречаться.
Zvezda Holding presents
Наш многополярный
Dynamic
мир
Spectrum Talks.
с Анной Шафран
Now.
и Юрием Линдером.